Hello everyone and welcome to the 4th annual edition of the Security Token Summit. First of all, let's have a round of applause for the Mayor of New York. What an amazing start to the day. So now today we have to make sure New York is going to be bigger and better than Miami. So we're going to get started. We have a jam-packed agenda for you guys today. Before we do get started, I do want to give a disclaimer that all the information and content that you'll hear on this stage today is all for information purposes. None of it can be construed as legal, tax, or investment advice. Now, I'm going to kickstart the day because we have a jam-packed agenda. I know you guys have been waiting quite a long time for a physical Draper Goren Holm event, so I'm not going to keep you guys too long. We're going to start the day handing it over to our first panel discussion. We have Inveniam's Chairman and CEO, Pat Ownera, and also our summit title sponsor. We have Ownera's co-founder and CEO, Ami Ben David. So a big round of applause for our first discussion of the day.
So this is startup. We're not waiting for the chair to come. And Ami, thanks for having us, buddy.
Cool. Hi. So maybe we start by introductions. So Pat, go ahead.
It's a pleasure to be with all of you. My name is Pat Ownera. I'm the chairman and CEO of Inveniam Capital Partners. We're an operating system for data at the edge. So what that means is if we're going to have private market assets trading on exchanges globally, we need one of two things to happen. We either need the world's largest database, or we need a way to make data that sits at the edge trusted. So how do you do that? So that's what we do. We facilitate data at the edge being able to be verified, and then we connect that to a digital instrument. What does that mean? That means the digital instrument has real-time surveillance on the underlying asset. So anybody who's in the securities business knows that surveillance of the underlying asset is huge. And if we can have real-time surveillance of an asset where that's not flowing through middleware of an accountant and a PDF, you have huge opportunities for changing accounting treatment, changing regulatory capital requirements in collateralization, and then that will lead to secondary markets.
Yeah, so just a few words about me and Ownera. We are the title sponsor here, and I'll be speaking later on as well. But just a quick kind of overview. Ownera is basically interconnecting the digital securities market, or it's here called security tokens, digital securities, it's the same thing. So we are interconnecting this market, which is very fragmented at the moment. It's a lot harder to basically sell and distribute tokenized securities because they're regulated, they have much more information, and I'll talk about it later. So what we are doing is we're creating a network that connects everybody to everybody, and effectively we give wallet providers, anybody that wants to give their clients, every financial institution that wants to give their clients a wallet, we give them a single API with a single address that can connect them to any private security that comes from any of the sources that are connected to our network. So in effect, instead of connecting to every tokenization engine separately, you can connect to one API and get everything from all the different securities. And the importance of this is that it will finally enable liquidity in this market, because an asset will be able to distribute to the entire market, and everyone in the market will be able to see all the assets. And that's, the liquidity element of it. But obviously, all of it doesn't work without data. And I think that one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today, a lot of people here are coming from crypto. And crypto is quite simple, actually. Crypto, Bitcoin, doesn't have any data on it. The only data that matters is on the chain, right? Who is the holder of the Bitcoin, but Bitcoin itself doesn't have data. Bitcoin itself is not an entity that exists, that have responsibilities. But digital securities are different. Private equity funds, real estate, and so on, they come with a lot of data. And you're actually building the data around all of those. So if you can tell us a little bit about what sort of data is coming around assets like private equity, what sort of data are you collecting, and how are you making this data available to investors?
Sure, so we're focused on data-rich, low-frequency trading assets, right? So if we want infrastructure, private equity, or real estate to trade, there's entropy in all of those assets. They change day to day. What's happening in those assets is always in flux. So you need to be able to trade that asset. You need to know the state of that asset so you can know the value of that asset so you can trade the capital stack. Does that make sense? And the concept of a token and real estate trading in a unitranche version is a step back from a capital market standpoint, right? And so we need to be able to look at these real assets and understand real time what's happening with that asset. Everything from water usage, energy usage, footfall, maintenance of a mechanical system, rent payments, et cetera, right? So what this does is it gives you the ability to have real-time visibility into what that asset's doing, so a third party can set a mark on it, so that you can then set a mark on every piece of the capital stack, right? And this is where we bring in a whole bunch of very large players. So Cushman & Wakefield, JLL, CBRE, Houlihan Lokey, Mercer, Deloitte, ValueStrat, Baker Tilly. These are the people who are using our software, who are marking the asset. And what they're doing is all of the inputs for their marks now are fully observable on chain. And because of that, this observability, this changes the accounting treatment of a real estate asset from level 3, an illiquid asset, to level 2, a marketable alternative. This has massive impact on people's balance sheets. So instead of carrying it at book minus accumulated depreciation, you can carry your real estate asset at fair market value. Think of every large owner of real estate in the world that's carrying fully depreciated assets, and their ability through better inputs to change the accounting treatment. That will change regulatory capital, and that will drive people to tokenization. We say price discovery is the killer app for blockchain.
Yeah, so I think it looks like what we're building is kind of playing on each other, because we're tokenizing assets, or bringing tokenized assets to the market, and I think a lot of people here are building tokenized assets. But building tokenized assets doesn't work without actually being able to bring the information. So today, every tokenization engine would basically tokenize the assets themselves, layer the information on top of them, layer the regulatory flows on top of them, and give it to their own clients, right? But if you want to get global distribution, you need to be able to provide this information to other players as well. So effectively, when we're working on tokenization platform, we have to go with Pat and people like Pat and basically provide information around the asset. And I think the other way is true as well. When you're providing information around a specific asset, what is the extra step that is needed to tokenize it? Not a lot, right? It's ready.
We're flipping a switch. And we want to make, I'm going to go back to something that you said, Ami. When we talk about liquidity, one of the things that we need to do in this group is, in a decentralized manner, we need to be able to aggregate liquidity across the silos. If we do that, we win, right? And I'm going to use an example of ECNs, right? When ECNs were trading in the early days, there were two dominant players, and they said, we don't need to interconnect with anybody else, right? We can stand on our own. We're going to be the dominant players. They built their own technology. They built their own liquidity pools, and they were winning. 7 of the others got together and they connected and they interconnected and they began trading with each other, flowing information back and forth. When Rule NMS came in, and you were forced to honor a bid away from where it was listed if it was best price, the 2 that hadn't connected with anybody had a whole bunch of remedial work, and they both died. The 7 that were connected won. Decentralization demands that the ATSs, the secondary markets, the new forms of primary issuance interconnect. This is Ownera, right? I mean, this is what you're going to deliver.
Yeah, so I think it's important that both of us here represent the view that it's an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem that works together. There's a lot of competition on any layer that we connect, on the custody layer, on the tokenization layer. There's fierce competition, and still people work with each other. And I think you might have competitions as well. But in your scenario, before we go on to that, tell me how much information on how much assets under management are you bringing in on a monthly basis now into the network?
So. Thank you. So in Q3, when we did our Series A, we had 700 million of assets on platform. In Q3, we did $1 billion of new assets. In Q4, we did $1 billion a month. In Q1 of this year, we did $1 billion a week. And right now, we have 130 billion of orders that we're processing. So our largest early adopters are all moving assets at scale onto our platform.
Okay. And so what I see there is I see basically a pipeline of assets in the billions that will become tokenized. And they will become tokenized with, players here around the room. And I think different asset classes, different jurisdiction will go to different engines and different providers and so on. It is an ecosystem play.
It absolutely is. And our buyers are not buying blockchain, right? Just like Oracle doesn't sell SQL, right? They sell enterprise solutions that solve a business pain point. We go into our clients and we're telling them we will give you observability of every data input for the mark that's going in. We're going to automate that. You're going to be able to check it, and you're going to be able to move from the data element directly to InvestTran, Cascade, Value D, Advent, Geneva, whatever the system is that you're using. And we're going to use robotic process automation. You're going to be able to audit every single data element and every single calculation. And they say, we want this. They're moving in at scale. They get better accounting treatment. And then we say, oh, by the way, which blockchain do you want this to be on? And that's when they go, oh, right? We're selling to CFOs and CIOs for better accounting treatment and observability. We're not selling to CTOs because that's a tough slog, right?
Yeah, and I think once you start building that, let's go back to the question of ecosystem. So we are an ecosystem company. We are participating in and leading a group that's called the it's under a nonprofit organization called GDF. It's a group of financial institutions and asset managers and exchanges. We have about 80 financial institutions on that group coming and meeting every other month. And I see a lot of familiar faces here who are in the group. And the whole idea of this group was to meet and talk about interoperability, about how we can all work together. And the group created a protocol called FinP2P, which is a protocol that allows the sale and trading of securities regardless of where they come from. And this is the protocol that we are implementing. And I see the chairman of the group, Anthony and Lavan are both here. So, if anybody wants to join the group and it's relevant, you're invited to come in. Because this is where, all the big banks are there, all the big exchanges, all the big asset managers, all the big fintechs in the space, all the competitors, if you will, come together, sit every other month, and actually launch a decentralized protocol. And we thought it couldn't be done. And one of the reasons it was possible is because COVID forced it all to a Zoom. And it's very easy to get 80 people on a Zoom. And if we were not in a Zoom environment, this probably wouldn't have happened. I mean, bringing 80 bankers in a room would have been almost impossible. So that's my approach to ecosystem. But I know you have also an approach to ecosystem, and I know you made some investments in the space. Can you tell me your vision of how this ecosystem connects? What are the components that make this ecosystem work?
Yeah, so if we think at one end is data, right? And you've got data source and a data element that needs to be relied upon by a third party in the future across multiple jurisdictions, supporting an asset over the life of that asset. Moving copies of the data around doesn't make sense. Actually orienting the people to see the same golden copy over time does, and the ability to prove. But then that flows from there onto multiple chains with middleware, public and private chains, into oracles. We're working with Chainlink. We have a number of other private oracles. Then those oracles feeding legacy and existing systems, and on-chain systems, smart contracts. And then that goes into tokenization, that goes into custody solutions, that goes into bulletin boards, that goes into markets, then DeFi and collateralization. And if you don't connect end to end, it doesn't work, right? Like you gotta have all the way from the data to the collateralization system and back instantaneously. Right, so you have to be able to work end to end, and if you have a collateralization mechanism, a DAO, whatever you want to use, that's going to lend, MakerDAO, Oasis Pro Markets, who's here, right? If these guys don't have an asset that something's lending against that you can see directly into the data system of the asset that has been a piece of the capital stack has been tokenized, it's not going to work at speed. So Inveniam, we've made 17 different investments into various different companies, Tokeny and Oasis Pro Markets, and we're going to be, I think, a lead in your round. Thanks for that in this coming up one. But in a number of these, where we're making sure that the ecosystem is stitched together, but we're not making one bet in each of those columns. We're making 2 and 3 and 4 bets because it can't be one player only. Does that make sense? We gotta have the ability to support multiple. And this is why we're excited to be in touch with you, is because with you there's a magnifying of functionality, because with that we're plugged into many different chains, many different systems, right?
Yeah, so you're building an empire basically.
We're supporting empire builders.
So this is a community, so I really like to make it, you know, back and forth. So if any of you have any questions to Pat or myself, please, do we have the option? Yeah, questions, please. Let's do it.
Tomorrow, the digitization of securities. But in reality,
Yo.
oh, there we go. How long is it going to take till we actually achieve the full digitization of securities? 1 year, 5 years, 10 years?
So it's a very valid question, because as I said before, crypto is really easy compared to securities. It's just a crypto, right? If you, 2 wallets connect to the same blockchain, they can trade, period. There's no data, there's nothing, there's no regulation. It's you know, but in our environment, as Pat said, you have to build an infrastructure, a set of things that have to happen for people to actually be able to trade. And I think we didn't have this set of things. I think what we have today is we have the tokenization engine, the kind of the verticals. Each one of them may be capturing 2% market share. And because they're all capturing 2%, 3%, 4% market share, but none, even the biggest banks don't have more than 5% market share in private markets. Because of that, there was no global liquidity, unlike in crypto. So a platform like the platform that, you know, Pat is building, and the network, Ownera, that we are building, takes it from a distribution of 2% to a distribution of maybe 90% or 100%. Suddenly you have the whole market. When you have the whole market, the number of assets that want to tokenize is unlimited. Ask anybody here in the exchanges that are actually working. Assets want to tokenize. There's no limitation on the number of assets. The problem was, until now, distribution. The ability to reach, actually having a wallet connected to Goldman Sachs, make a purchase on an asset that was launched by, I don't know, an exchange in Singapore. That's what's missing. Now, we're seeing this coming. Ownera itself is launching in Q3. Some of the smaller players are going to start first, and then some of the bigger banks are going to come in. And when the big banks are in, nobody else can stay out. Because now every asset you want to tokenize, you have they will gravitate to the network with the most distribution. So to answer your questions, I think we are seeing assets now. Definitely, I mean, there's ADEX in Singapore that have been running assets for the last 18 months. You know, Archex in the UK, T0, INX, and so on. But it's all still kind of very embryonic, or it's a starting phase. You're going to see more and more this year. And next year, beginning of next year, when the big banks and the big exchanges come in through our networks and through Inveniam's data, you're going to see a significant spike. When you know, Pat, do you want to talk about Apex and, you know, their kind of plan to switch to a blockchain company?
Sure. So one of our lead investors in our last round was Apex. And Apex is a fund administrator, and they administer about 2.5 trillion. But importantly, they're the largest administrator of alternative assets in the world, right? And they have 1.5 trillion of alternative assets. And as they administer, the largest of those of that is real estate, about 800 billion of real estate funds that they're the administrator of. They post their investment in us, watching the data, the benefit that they're bringing. They are pivoting their entire business plan into this. And at our conference, the CEO and global head of innovation made the comment. He said, in 5 years, we're not going to be a fund administrator or a financial services company. We're going to be a systems operators on behalf of third parties on chain. That's an amazing statement for a company that has 9,000 employees around the globe and administers 2.5 trillion. And they're saying they're pivoting into blockchain. We have to give them mechanisms to pivot into us that is regulatory compliant, that works, and we're still in those early testing days. But we feel, to your question, step one is when we can have good accounting treatment and improved accounting treatment because it's tokenized. If we get that, step 2 is better regulatory capital treatment and clear regulatory capital treatment. Step 3 is collateralization, lending, posting, how that's going to be counted on a balance sheet. 4 is secondary markets, and 5 is new novel forms of primary distribution. Now, along the way, people like Andrew Au who with Ownera is taking companies, putting them on chain. They have tokens, they are trading, it's fantastic. But one of the things that's happening is they're looking for better data. So we're connecting up to him, his $14 billion market cap token that he believes is trading at a discount. The only way to prove that is having third parties mark the performance of part of his book. Does that make sense? And all of those marks we're connecting up into a token where people can look at that, they can see the book value compared to trading value, and we can compress that discount.
And you know, Pat is the expert on all the kind of hard work that needs to go into actually making it happen. But I do want to talk for a second about what are the drivers that are pushing this into actually happening. I think the drivers are this. We're enabling 3 services around to the assets. One is primary distribution, which is digital. Today, to sell a private security takes 2 months, right? A lot of lawyers, a lot of activity back and forth with each investor separately. On our platform that connects everybody, a trade takes 1 second and it's done. Done all the way to the source, and the client has all the information available for them to make a good decision because we're connected to Pat's platform. So that's primary moving from 2 months to 2 seconds. Then secondary trading, if you look at secondary trading, in most of these assets, there's no secondary trading. In real estate, institutional real estate, there's no secondary trading. In private securities, there's some, Forge is doing really good business in this space, NASDAQ private markets and others, so there is markets, but you can do 5 to 10x by moving a transaction from 2 months to 1 second. In other markets like real estate, there's just no secondary. So you provide a new class. And then on top of that, people can start borrowing DeFi style. So you can, if you have, let's say, $10 million in a real estate investment, and you want to borrow money against it and use it for leverage, at a click of a button, any one of the banks on the network can offer, or any one of it could be peer-to-peer as well, can offer you money against, as a pair, almost like DeFi, against a security. So these are three kind of advantages that are real-life benefits to everybody that can only be achieved with digitization. So the push for the digitization is massive. But without distribution, it's not happening. So that's I think, the key element that we need to solve.
And I want to talk about that last piece about the borrowing. Right now, Plaid and Stripe, they're amazing on the consumer level, right? So they can look at, I get paid on a Thursday afternoon, I pay my light bill, I pay my rent, I pay my car payment, and before I go to the bar on Friday, because I'm a 24-year-old worker, they take a piece of their payment, right? Because they're protecting their monthly remittance because they know my behavior as a spender, right? As a 24-year-old. We are now doing this. We're in the middle of a hackathon right now with Chainlinked, where we're feeding live data from a real asset through an oracle to a smart contract, where that app, we're servicing, where it goes into special servicing, instead of the money going into an account and there's a lockbox on that real estate asset, that smart contract is going to take a piece of every rental payment the moment it's created, push a little bit to the senior mortgage, a little bit to the mezz, a little bit to the equity. That's Plaid at the corporate level. Does that make sense? Where we're literally getting directly into the performance of that asset, and a bank can step up their position in the cash flow even well ahead of a lockbox. That's amazing, right? And you look at this and you say, this type of data, when you connect it to a digital asset, this is when you think investment banking brought to the private markets is going to explode upward, right? Secondary markets are going to explode upward. But it's all connecting asset data to a token, and then allowing that token to have many different venues for how to trade. And the biggest thing that I have to say here is, if you think somebody's your enemy because they compete with you, and you think you're gonna die because they get a deal and you don't, you're not fit to be a company in this room. because this is blue water space, and there is room in this ecosystem for everyone to grow as fast as you can possibly grow. But we as an ecosystem have to exist cooperatively. Otherwise, we're not going to achieve what's possible.
Okay, so thank you. I think both Pat and I can continue talking for hours if we're just left alone. So we'll wrap up here, and thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.